Hello everyone and welcome to this video. So today we're going to be exploring why the rising sign or ascendant is the most important sign in your chart, especially when looking at readings and horoscopes and things like that. So we're going to get into understanding just some basics about the rising sign and also understanding why it is so important when you're actually reading a horoscope in a newspaper, for example, or listening to a video on YouTube about interpretation. So let's get into it. Okay, so I have my very basic astrological chart up as well. We're starting obviously with Aries as the first house, moving through to Pisces. If you haven't watched the video on how to create a horoscope and understanding horoscopes, I will link that video down below. Make sure you check that out because this video is strongly connected into that. So when we all jump online or read a horoscope in the paper or a magazine, for example, we are reading something that is based on the collective energy, first of all, for that particular zodiac sign. So it's never going to be intensely personal. It's always a collective energy. And most of the time, depending on who you're watching in terms of astrology and things like that, they tend to focus on one particular transit when they're doing the interpretation. Each astrologer is going to be different on what they're focusing on, but let's say, for example, we're going to talk about a full moon. If you're watching a full moon video on your horoscope, or if you're watching or reading a horoscope based around the full moon, the reason why you shouldn't be watching your sun sign is because it's not accurate. Now, hear me out. Before you will come at me, it is going to be accurate to a certain degree because the sun sign does represent aspects of your energy, your vitality, your higher self, and the potential you're here to live. But at the same time, if you're basing it more on a personal connection and how it's going to be affecting you personally, it's not going to be completely accurate because your sun sign, or where your sun is placed in your personal chart, is not necessarily going to be based on where the actual interpretation is occurring. So what do I mean by interpretation? Again, if you haven't watched the horoscope video and how to create your horoscope, please go and check that out because it goes into that far more in detail. But this is essentially looking at the energies that the astrologer is actually interpreting based on the house and the energies that are being transited. So let's use myself as an example. So I am a sun sign Scorpio, and Scorpio rules my 11th house in my personal birth chart. However, if I was going to just watch a Scorpio horoscope online, the interpretation is going to actually be based on a different location because Scorpio is being counted as the first house. Please watch the horoscope sign, horoscope video, I should say, because it'll go far more in depth in that. So let's say, for example, we're talking about the new moon in Gemini. So I'm going to use my little magnet as a note here. So if we're talking about a new moon in Gemini interpretation for Scorpio, if you're watching even what I would do online, so when I'm doing a horoscope reading, I'm going to be basing Scorpio as the first house because I'm doing a collective energy reading as a horoscope. So very basic. So Scorpio is the first house, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. So I'm basing the interpretation for the new moon in Gemini on the 8th house being activated for Scorpio and how that is going to affect them. Now, this is going to have a certain energy and there's an overall collective energy that is going to be activated. However, if you want to know how it's going to be affecting your personal birth chart, your rising sign is what you need to look at. So my rising sign is Capricorn. I'm just going to pop a little note here or a little magnet so we know. So if I was going to be looking at my birth chart, for example, Capricorn would be located here on the ascendant cusp. But for the purpose of this, I'm not going to change everything around. So if I'm watching my rising sign, it's actually going to be more accurate. So first of all, Capricorn as the first house, then we have the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Now I know for a fact that Gemini does rule my 6th house. And this is the reason why. Because in your personal birth chart, the ascendant or the rising sign is always this line here, which is the first house cusp, which makes your descendant over here, and your MC is up here, and your DC is down here. So this is where your horoscope is going to be counted from. Now, for the sake of this, I'm using whole signs as an example. Placidus is still not going to affect it based on what sign rules particular houses, but it'll vary slightly with where placements are. So your rising sign is always going to be your first house. Now, I've had people question before, but when I do my chart, it says my rising sign is in my 12th house. That is because you are using whole sign placement. And when you use whole sign placement, if you are in the final degrees of a chart, it's going to push your ascendant into looking like it's in the 12th house, but it's not actually in the 12th house. So it's something that I've seen a few people say. So your rising sign is not the whole sign, it's this line. It is the ascendant line. It represents the sign that is on the horizon, that is rising at your time of birth. So it's always going to be the first house cusp, and this is your first house. And then you have your second, third, fourth, fifth. So for me, Capricorn would be in this position. So Capricorn is my first house. So when you are doing a chart interpretation based on, again, coming back to this new moon in Gemini, you're counting that sign that you're doing the zodiac reading for, the horoscope for, as house 1. And then you're counting to the placement of whatever it is, or the house that is being activated as the horoscope. So if I was going to be watching my sun sign, it's going to activate, again, as we said, the 8th house, which is not actually what Gemini rules. If I was going to watch my moon sign, which my moon sign is Sagittarius, it's going to be talking about the 7th house being activated. However, I know for a fact that that is not what is actually being activated. So your sun sign and moon signs, just because they are main placements, they're actually at different locations in your chart, in different houses in your chart. So whereas if you're watching your rising sign, you're always going to get the most accurate interpretation of what energies in your personal birth chart are being activated, because it is basing it on your zodiac sign interpretation being house 1, and your rising sign, as I mentioned, is always house 1. So let me see if I can explain this again differently. So let's say we're going to be talking about something happening like the previous full moon eclipse that happened in Scorpio. So for a sun sign interpretation, this is going to tell me it's activating my first house. But I know my birth chart, so I know that that is actually activating my 11th house, because Scorpio rules my 11th house. But when I'm watching a horoscope, it's going to tell me, or the astrologer or interpreter or the reading is going to be talking about it activating my first house. So there's still going to be undertones of the same kind of energy. You're still going to feel a connection to it to a certain degree, because it is an energy being activated, but it's not as accurate as it could be. Whereas if I was listening to Capricorn as the first house, it's going to be saying it's activating my 11th house. We're going backwards as house 1, then 12, then 11, which is accurate. As I mentioned, Scorpio is my 11th house. So your rising sign is the most important the most important horoscope to listen to, because it's going to be talking about the exact activations in your particular houses at that point in time. If you don't know your rising sign, first of all, you do need your time of birth to get the most accurate aspect. If you don't know your time of birth, the rule of thumb, and what most astrologers do, is add 12 p.m. It's midday. However, it's not necessarily going to be accurate unless you were born around that time, because the rising sign changes location every 2 hours. So if you don't know your rising sign, the rising aspect, the ascendant, if you don't know your time of birth, the rising sign is not necessarily going to be accurate, which in turn means that the houses that are being activated are not necessarily going to be accurate either. So that's the unfortunate thing of not knowing your time of birth. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't get readings and things like that. You can still get energies that are very accurate still. It's just not going to be the exact snapshot of your chart at that particular time. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope this has made sense. I hope I've explained myself well enough for you to understand. So make sure from now on that you always check your rising sign first when listening to a horoscope, and then go on to your sun sign and your moon sign. Obviously, they are all going to represent different aspects when you're listening to them, but if you're looking at something based on your chart being the most accurate, the rising sign is going to be the one to watch. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.